In today's video, we're going to be starting the conversation on what makes a truly effective face-to-face fundraiser. Hey, what's up guys? Jules here and welcome to this episode. So today we're going to be starting the exploration of what makes a truly effective fundraiser. And I say starting because I want to create a whole bunch of episodes on this particular topic. You know, I've spent the last 15 or more years in face-to-face, everything from a fundraiser for many years, a team leader, a regional manager, a senior manager, a national director, a training and development manager. And, you know, one of my obsessions throughout my career has been trying to discover what makes truly effective fundraisers. I've worked across 3 continents, Canada, US, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, in face-to-face for over 26 charities. And I've had the pleasure, the opportunity to work alongside some incredible fundraisers and really pick their brains to try and discover what are those common denominators. What are those things that make people truly exceptional at fundraising? And so I want to create a series of episodes looking at some different aspects. Today, I want to start on one of the most fundamental. Now, before I go into the meat of today's episode, I want to take you on a little bit of a thought experiment, and I've got a point to make here. So just bear with me for a couple of minutes. So if I was to ask you how long you've been driving a car for, you've probably been doing that for quite some years. You probably had your driving license for maybe 5, 10, maybe 15 or more years at this point, and you probably drive quite regularly. Now, if I was to ask you if you feel you've improved significantly in your driving skill in the last, let's say, 12 months, you'd probably answer like I would and many other people would, which is no, I haven't. My driving skill has probably been the same for many years, perhaps even, you know, shortly after I started driving. It hasn't really changed much at all. Now, why is that? You probably drive your car very often, perhaps multiple times a day. Why have you not progressed in your driving skill? Why are you not the Lewis Hamilton of your neighborhood by now? Why have you stayed stagnant in your development of your driving skill even though you get so much practice? And this all comes down to the way that we're practicing. What we are often doing when we're driving is we are unconscious of driving itself. We are not reflecting on what we're doing. We are often, just going through the motions on automatic pilot. I'm sure you've had that experience of driving home and not remembering the drive. Perhaps you were listening to music or a podcast or having a conversation with someone, and you were completely unaware of the drive. Even though you were performing some complex tasks, you were just completely unaware of it. Now, this is not all a bad thing. Obviously, with driving, it's a great thing. I love my audiobooks, I love my podcasts, I love my music, so I don't really want to be spending as much effort and energy on driving as I did when I started. You know, when I started driving, there was a huge amount of energy and effort I had to put in, a huge amount of focus. I remember not being able to put on the radio for a while because I had to focus on all the different aspects. But then what happens is over time, we reach a comfort zone. You know, perhaps subconsciously we get to a point at which we're happy with our level of skill, and then we stop thinking, we stop improving, and we continue to drive at that same level of proficiency. So what does this have to do with becoming an excellent fundraiser? Well, in order to improve at the skill of fundraising, in order to become the best fundraiser you can possibly be, you have to be continually practicing with intention. Right? There's an idea called deliberate practice, which is just a systematic approach to training, to learning, to developing, where you're actually thinking about what you're doing. You're reflecting on how you perform. You're asking yourself questions like, how did that conversation go? What went really well? What could I have done better? What do I want to do differently next time? And it's not about spending an enormous amount of time doing this, but it's about this constant practice of being present, being aware, and actually practicing deliberately. Not being so concerned with the external circumstances, but being far more concerned with what you're doing and how you can tweak or change your process and your approach to be the best fundraiser you can possibly be. Now, you might say to me, well, Jules, I'm not mindlessly fundraising. And of course, you're not doing it in the same way that you would be driving. But if you were to seriously think about the last fundraising session shift that you did, Were you deliberately practicing your fundraising? Were you thinking about what you were doing? Were you trying new things? Were you tweaking things? Were you, doing the things that you know are effective and changing the things that maybe weren't working for you? And, if we're honest, we probably weren't spending that much time thinking about what we're doing. And I see so many fundraisers that get to a certain level of performance and then seem to never improve. In fact, often what happens is when you change medium or you change charity or campaign, I often see people struggle because a new environment, a new campaign, a new cause doesn't perhaps fit with the old way they used to fundraise or their traditional style, the style they've become very used to. And because they aren't used to trying new things and tweaking what they're doing, they now suddenly struggle. I've heard so many fundraisers going from medium to medium, which say that medium is harder. I don't like that medium. And when I say medium, I mean from door to door to street to private sites to events. And many of those fundraisers, wherever they start, that is the medium they prefer because they've become so accustomed to that type of fundraising, to that style, to that approach. And so they aren't used to changing. And so, think about your own performance over the last sort of 6 months or so. Has it improved? Are you continuously improving from week to week, perhaps from month to month? Improvement doesn't happen overnight, but are you continuously and progressively improving? Are you getting better? And then ask yourself, am I actually focused on what I'm doing? Or is this just mindless repetition, me just doing what I know how to do, what I'm comfortable doing? Are you pushing your boundaries? Are you trying to seek out new ways? Are you speaking to your colleagues and finding out what works for them and trying new approaches? In my experience, this is one of the hallmarks of truly effective fundraisers. They are constantly trying to improve. They are looking for other new ways, new approaches, new strategies. They are trying on different hats and they are testing and pushing the limits of what they're capable of. And in all fairness, for me, this is what gives me joy in my job, right? It becomes boring and dull if I'm not continuously trying to push the boundaries of what I'm doing. And so what's my call to action? I would highly encourage you to deliberately practice. Number one, become aware. Become aware of what you're doing. Number two, reflect on how you're doing what you're doing, right? Think about just even for a few seconds, for a minute after a conversation, how that went, what went well, what didn't go well, what do you want to keep doing? Especially when you're successful, think about what really worked for you there, what felt good, what do you want to continue doing? Speak to fellow fundraisers and colleagues and continue to test out and try out new things. Don't focus on the external circumstances. There are always going to be external circumstances. It doesn't mean that the situations are always going to be optimal. They certainly aren't, but that's life. Life is not always going to give you the best or the optimal situations. So rather focus on yourself. Focus on what you have 100% responsibility over. And that is your actions. That is your behaviors. And I guarantee you, if you take this approach to fundraising and to life, there are no limits to what you can achieve. So I hope this has been helpful. I know this is probably not as sexy as you wanted it to be. It's certainly not as sexy as I wanted it to be, but it's the truth. It's the reality of the situation. So that's it from me. Until the next episode, stay inspired and keep fundraising.